Good evening, dear friends. Here we are, My God, lesson 4. And today's class is titled His Expectations. And in this class is really where we're going to get down to our relationship with God, God's relationship with us. We're going to get down a little bit more personal now. All right, so let's recap, at least very briefly. First class, oh, there we go. We got some more company. Oh, welcome in, Max.
Thank you.
Welcome to the in-person experience. Take this off over here. Okay. Okay, lesson 1, we spoke a lot about the very basics. That was the title of the class. The real basics. What is God? Who is God? God's gender. The next class, we got a little bit more to God's nature, his feelings, his logic. Last week last week's class was titled his reasons. Hello, how are you? Good evening. How's it going? It's good. Okay. No, don't worry. You know, the wind, we could blame it on the wind.
And I actually parked on back.
I know, exactly.
Because you had to, that's right. It's busy here. All right. And this week we are finally up to what we're going to call his expectations, his relationship with us, our relationship with him, and what he expects of our relationship. So here's what we got on the menu for today for lesson 4. Question number one. Do I have to believe in God to be Jewish? Okay, is believing God a prerequisite for a Jew? Number 2, is it kosher to have doubts about God? All right. Number 3, why must I fear God? What's up with the fearing God? And number 4, I'm okay with believing in God, but I'm not religious. Can we still have a relationship? Am I out of luck if I'm not religious in terms of having a relationship with God? So we got some big questions, and I actually want to dedicate tonight's class. Earlier today, we received the news that the Chabad Shlucha in the Virgin Islands, she's in critical condition. She's on life support. She and her baby were found drowning in the ocean. Unfortunately, the baby has passed, and she's on life support. And we don't know what there's the suspect of foul play. I don't know exactly, but yeah, his mother. So I want to dedicate tonight's class for a speedy recovery and a complete recovery of Henya Bas Bracha Devar Leah. We should only have good news, and may this Torah study add to her honor and to her merit for speedy and complete recovery. Amen. And with that, we should only have good news. Too much bad news. Okay. With that, let us begin our first question for tonight. Question number 1: do I have to believe in God to be Jewish? Do I have to believe in God to be Jewish? So you say no. There are a lot of Jews who would say, I'm a Jew, maybe I'm even a proud Jew, but I don't believe in God. But so I think a lot of people would maybe say that. And says, no, you don't have to believe in God to be Jewish. To believe in God is obviously a very important thing. So how does that work out? And it's an important question to ask, because some actually may assume, and some believers would call out other people and say, oh, you don't believe, you're not even a believer, you're not really Jewish. Unfortunately, some people say those things. And maybe there are some Jews which feel like, I don't know, am I really Jewish if I don't believe in God? I don't know. So it's a question worth asking, and it's a question worth going into in depth. And with that, I want to go a little bit deep into this question. We're going to ask, do I have to believe in God to be Jewish? Your question is, what makes you a Jew? What makes a Jew a Jew? And this is going to set the tone for the rest of tonight's class. We're going to speak up. This is going to give us the foundation for a lot of what we're going to do tonight. So it's really, if you ask what makes a Jew, it's actually a very tricky question. It's not a simple question to answer. And most people get it wrong. What makes a Jew a Jew? So let's take a look over here. Take a look up in your books on page 112. And then we have 4 different terms, along with definitions that come from Merriam-Webster.com. So we've got four terms here. So let us read the terms and let's take a little vote. You'll tell me what you think. So number one, term number one of what is a Jew? The first one is race. Now, what's race? It says here in your books on page 112, race is a group that humans are often divided into based on physical traits regarded as common among people of shared ancestry. Right? It's like all Asian people have an Asian look. Am I being racist? Should I tell you a racist joke? No, don't worry. I don't think it's don't worry. I'm not going to be. So there's a Chinese individual, and he's on his very first business trip ever to America. It's the first time ever really leaving China. And he has a business meeting in Manhattan with a Jew. So they meet up in a restaurant. And he's meeting Jews for the first time. You know, he's an intelligent Chinese guy, businessman. And they sit down at the restaurant, kosher restaurant. And the Jew introduces himself and says that he's Mr. Goldberg. My name is Mr. Goldberg. So the Chinese guy says, 1 second, Goldberg sounds a little bit familiar. Oh, Goldberg. Didn't you maybe take down the Titanic? Was that you? So the Jew says, no, that's an iceberg. I'm Goldberg. The Chinese guy said, iceberg, Goldberg, it's all the same thing. So the Jew said, 1 second, you're Chinese. Weren't you the guys that messed around with us Americans at Pearl Harbor? So he said, no, that wasn't us. That was the Japanese, not the Chinese. So the Jew said, Japanese, Chinese, all the same thing. Okay. That's a joke. All right. Is it a racist joke? It's okay. It's just on the borderline. Okay. I'm not getting myself in too much trouble. I don't know. As a kid, that's how I heard the joke. Okay. Goldberg, iceberg, Goldberg, all the same thing. Okay. Very good. Maybe we went the other way around. The Jew, right? Is that the way it goes? That's the way I heard the joke. Okay. Not the best one, but okay. Why not? Okay. So race. So race are people that are commonly lumped together based on physical traits, shared ancestry. Who's going to go that this is what defines a Jew? This is kind of what makes a Jew. You could vote on more than one, by the way, over here. You don't have to be very selective. Anyone think that race is what makes a Jew? Nobody.
Very, very distant chance of that.
A very, very low chance of that. Okay. All right. Let's move on to the next one. Culture. Jewish culture.
Everybody came from Adam and Eve, and thus we're
Right.
all Jews. But
Right.
there's,
But we still have the social construct of and Adam and Eve weren't Jewish necessarily.
yes, sir.
Right. First humans.
Can't be culture. There's a whole bunch of different Jewish.
Oh, so you're saying there's way too many Jewish cultures to be able to say that there's one culture that makes us. Well, let's move on to that. Culture. What's culture? The customary beliefs, social norms, and material traits of a racial, religious, or social group. So does Jewish culture make a Jew a Jew? No? Okay. All right. Still no votes. Nation. A people having a common origin, tradition, and language, and capable of forming or actually constituting a nation state. What would you say? Does the nation make a Jew a Jew?
Doesn't make.
Right.
They belong to the same.
What is a
nation,
Jew?
but
Oh,
but does a nation make a Jew?
right. So there is an element of nationality or nationhood in the Jewish people, but right. Okay. Any votes for nation? No votes for nation. All right. We're running out of options, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, last option, at least on the paper over here, is religion. What's religion? A cause, principle, or system of beliefs held to with ardor and faith. So does the religion make a Jew a Jew? Anybody?
Partially, at least. I mean, to be defined as a Jew, religiously, you have to have a Jewish mother or be converted in accordance with the rules of the religion. So at least partially,
Right.
the
So
religion can make.
the religion definitely is part of it. But does that, right? The question,
It's not the end of the question. If you don't believe in the Jewish religion, but your mother's Jewish, You're still Jewish.
Right. Okay, so with that, it's a tricky question, as we'll see. So let's, I'm gonna share with you a little video. And this video is gonna walk us through this exact question with these 4 options. And it will help clarify for us what makes a Jew a Jew. What is a Jew? What is a Jew? Simple as that. Here we go.
What makes a Jewish person Jewish? Do you need a kippah, a necklace, synagogue membership? Do you have to do anything at all? Here's a mythbuster. Plenty of Jewish people have never seen a synagogue and have no clue about Jewish symbols, beliefs, traditions, or cuisine. But they are as Jewish as Moses. So, what's it all about? You see, we love to sort things into categories, create neat labels, and use those labels to help us understand our world a little better. Here are 4 popular ways of classifying people. Does being Jewish have to do with any of these? Are you Jewish because you belong to the Jewish race? Hold on, is there even such a thing as a Jewish race? Look at these images. These folks are all equally Jewish. Race doesn't appear to be a factor. Actually, non-Jewish people from the most diverse places and races can become fully Jewish. So we clearly can't define Jewishness as belonging to a specific race. Why don't we try culture? Are you Jewish because you follow the Jewish culture? Well, you might be, if there was a Jewish culture to follow. But there is no single culture common to all Jews. Here's why. The ancient Jews lived in the land of Israel for over a millennia, but they were forced into exile by the ancient Romans. That happened almost 2 millennia ago. Since then, Jews settled all over the globe. The result of Jews spending centuries in very different kinds of places was that they developed many very distinct cultures, including unique ways of dressing, unique foods, styles of music, prayers, practices, dialect, and celebrations. The result? There is no single uniform Jewish culture. So Jewishness is not based on culture. What about nationality? That's a legal term. It means that you belong to a certain country or state. If Jewish is a description of your nationality, it would mean that you are a citizen of a Jewish state. But that's not the case. We've got British, French, Italian, Turkish, South African, Swedish, Spanish, Argentinian, and Indian Jews. You'll find Jews in every country, and almost all of them are citizens only of the state within which they reside. Even the state of Israel includes millions of non-Jewish Israeli citizens. That pops the nationality argument, doesn't it? And here's a bigger buster. Historically, the Jews did not have an independent state for most of their existence as a people. Strike 3. Religion. That sounds good. Are you Jewish because you follow the Jewish religion? Well, no, because many Jews do not associate themselves with any religion. In fact, there are many Jews who do not even know they are Jewish. And there are also Jews who practice a religion other than Judaism. But according to Judaism, they are all equally Jewish. Phew, this is really tough. I guess it's time for the one and only Jewish answer. Being Jewish means that you have a Jewish soul. How do you get a Jewish soul? The most common way is through a Jewish mother. You see, according to Judaism, every child to a Jewish mother is naturally born with a Jewish soul. Your mother's race and nationality make no difference. She might follow the Jewish religion or culture, or she might not. But if she's Jewish, you're Jewish. And there's no opting out. If you're born a Jew, it means that God decided that you're meant to be Jewish for life. So if you're Jewish, thank your mom. Then there's conversion. If you were not born to a Jewish mother, but you complete the authentic and challenging Jewish process of becoming Jewish, God will give you a Jewish soul at the moment of conversion. So what can we take away from all this? It is the privilege and responsibility of each Jew to lead a Jewish life, but those who do not are authentically Jewish. Living the Jewish way allows your soul to shine, but it does not create your soul. That's already alive and kicking inside you, waiting for you to connect. So what is a Jew? It's a spiritual force within you.
That was a great little video. Okay, so there we have it. And it's so important, so essential to kind of have this foundation that Jewish identity is very deep, and it is one thing and one thing only. It's your Jewish soul. It's what we call the neshama. Let's read. I want to read this with you. Our first text for this evening, text 2 in your books, page 114, a text from the Rebbe. So, would you like to read, Thomas?
Sure.
All right, text 2. Here we go.
Jewishness is not a casual feature of Jews' identity. Rather, it is his or her very existence. The status of human, animal, or vegetable is immutable, declaring that one is no longer a human, that an animal really isn't an animal, or that a vegetable is no longer a vegetable is ineffective. Even if a person will go so far as denying their own existence or the existence of the human species, it still won't help. It is not a question of free will. We possess free will over our behavior, actions, speech, and thought, but not over the essence and identity.
It's a very beautiful concept. There's who you are, and then there's things that you assume, added layers upon your essence. So what's your essence? Your essence is that you're a human, for example. There's nothing to do to strip yourself of your humanity. I'm going to stop being a human. There's an old folk tale about a child who convinced himself that he's a chicken. You know what I'm talking about? You know what I'm saying? It's this. Maybe a bit later I'll share. Maybe it fits in by the end of the class. The same way we all understand that it's not like you could choose if I'm a human or not. You could choose if you're going to be a fireman or if you're going to be a lawyer. Those are assumed identities. Then it's simply who you are, your essence. That's not something you could throw off. You could choose to ignore it, but it's still a part of you. So the Jewish understanding of what makes a Jew is actually nothing that he or she will ever assume in life, whether it's their beliefs, whether it's their religiosity, their level of observance. All of that is really, none of that has any effect on the ultimate question, is this person a Jew or not? You could have somebody who, as the video said, has no religion, no Jewish religion, no Jewish culture, no Jewish nothing. But if they're a Jew, just as much as anybody else is a Jew, just as much as Moses was a Jew. This is the important idea. What makes a Jew is simply their soul. And this is really the reason why there's no such thing as a Jew walking away from the Judaism. It's impossible. A human can't walk away from being a human. A cucumber can't walk away from being a cucumber. A Jew can't walk away from being a Jew. And this is where we have the beautiful statement from the Talmud. Our sages tell us. Look at text 3, page 115. And the Rebbe used to quote this line from the Talmud so often. Rabbi Abba Bar Zavda said, even one who sins remains a Jew. Doesn't matter if this person is the biggest sinner. Nothing can change the Jewishness of a person. Everything else you could get rid of. You could get rid of your nationality, you could switch your nationality, you could discard your beliefs, you could get rid of your culture. There's a lot of layers you could peel off. The essence of you being a Jew is immutable. So here's a little story. Ready for a story? Here's a story. Back in the day, as we all know, just as there's today, and unfortunately we're once again seeing it rear its ugly head, there's anti-Semitism. And one of the forms of anti-Semitism in Europe was religious persecution, where the church was trying to get Jews to convert. So the story goes that in Eastern Europe, probably in Poland, they had the annual conference of all the priests. And of course, one of the big questions of the conference was, how do we get the Jews to convert? And one elderly priest stood up and said, listen, all of you guys are offering good ideas. I'm just telling you, we've tried it all. I've been around the block. Let me just tell you, there's only one answer to this question. There's only one way to get a Jew to convert, which is Jews love money. We have to make a campaign, Black Friday sale, that for 1 month promotion, any Jew who converts is going to make 100 ruble. If we do that all across Poland, one day we all announce together, Jews convert, they get money, I promise you we'll have lines out the building. They vote on it. Sounds like a good idea. Give a Jew money and that's it. It will work. And that's what they do. One day, all the Jews wake up and there's signs all around town saying special promotion for this month for the Jews, whoever converts, 100 ruble. Okay. There is this a very simple Jew, a peddler, simple and poor Jew. His name was Moshe. And Moshe sees it in the morning, comes home to his wife and says, my dear wife, I am leaving on a trip for the next month. I'm not going to be home for the next month. I'm traveling from city to city, from church to church, and I will be converting as many times as I can to collect all my hundreds of rubles one at a time. I'll be back in 30 days with as much as I can pocket. What do I care? I'll walk in there. I'll do whatever they want me to do. I get my money. When I get back home, we'll be able to marry off all of our kids, no problem. We're going to be rich. And that's what Moshe does. He goes first to the church in his town, walks right in, says, I would like to convert. So I say, okay, sit down. They start reading to him all the rules, all the beliefs. Do you believe in this? Yes. Will you do this? Yes. Will you not do this? Yes. No problem. He's fully committed. Then the priest takes the holy water, sprinkles on him 3 times, and says, Christian, Christian, Christian. He says, now you're a Christian. You're not a Jew anymore. Here's your 100 ruble. And Moshe can't get out of there fast enough on his way to the next church for the exact same drill. Okay. This is going on for 30 days. Moshe is having a grand time. The last day of the promotion, he's in some, who knows where, one of these small little hamlets in Poland. It's a Friday. It's late for Shabbos. But Moshe, he's a businessman. He's trying to make his last deal before he has to go for Shabbos. So he's sitting there. He's in a little bit of a rush. And he's just so bored of the whole thing. He just knows this by heart already. He's just saying, yes, 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 yes. He's very disinterested. And the priest could see it in him. This guy's not that, you're converting. He's not passionate enough. He's so not interested. But the priest can't not convert him. So the priest converts him. But the priest says, you know what? I'm going to spy on this Jew a little bit. I want to follow him around. I don't know. Something seems a little bit smelly, a little bit fishy. So he goes Friday afternoon, right after, he follows the Jew from afar. He sees a Jew is staying in the local rabbi's house. Seems suspicious, but it's not against the rules. Doesn't say anywhere that he's not allowed to stay in the rabbi's house. But he's staying in the rabbi's house for Shabbos. He sees that an hour later, the rabbi and this Moshe, newly converted Moshe, walking together, dressed in their Shabbos fineries to shul Friday night. He says, look, it doesn't go against the rules to go to shul on Friday night. He sees Moshe's there, Moshe's praying. It's a little bit off, but it doesn't go against the rules. Maybe, he's just hanging out with old friends, who knows? Then they go home after the Friday night services, and they sit down for the Shabbos dinner. And the priest says, oh, here's my chance. One of the rules that Moshe agreed to is that you're not allowed to eat chicken on Friday night. And if they serve chicken, that will be my chance to catch them. And lo and behold, they have the first course. Then second course comes out, and it's chicken. And Moshe starts digging in, and right then, the priest barges right through the front door and says, Moshe, I caught you. You're a liar. You're a thief. You said you're converting. And look right here. You're eating chicken. So Moshe turns around all coolly and says, dear father, what seems to be the problem? So the priest says, what's the problem? You're eating chicken. It's forbidden Friday night. Just today you said that you agreed to that. He said, Father, this is not a piece of chicken. This is a piece of fish. So the priest says, what are you talking about? This is chicken. It's going back and forth. Fish, chicken, chicken, fish. Look, you don't see the wing there? There's no way this is a piece of fish. And Moshe finally says, well, let me explain to you. What did you do to me today? I walked into your church. I'm a Jew. And you asked me a bunch of questions, sprinkled water on me 3 times, said Christian, Christian, Christian. And that made me into Christian. That's exactly what I did to the chicken. I asked it a bunch of questions, sprinkled it 3 times with water. I said, fish, fish, fish. Now it's fish. What's the moral of the story? Can't make chicken into a fish. A Jew is a Jew is a Jew. There's no way out of that. And it's a very important premise. Does a Jew need, let's get to our question over here. I want to put this up over here on the board. So what is a Jew? A Jew is somebody who has a Jewish soul. That is literally the only, it's a question of DNA, right? Spiritual DNA. If you have the spiritual DNA, you're a Jew. Nothing else matters. As the Talmud says, even one who sins remains a Jew. You can't discard your essence. Okay. Now, let's answer the question. We asked, do you need to believe in God to be a Jew? What is obviously the answer? No, you don't believe in God, no problem. Doesn't make any less Jewish. Now, it would be nice for a Jew to believe in God, but it's not a prerequisite. Somebody who's more religious is not more Jewish than somebody who's not religious. Doesn't make a difference. It just simply doesn't make a difference. Now, so you could say, if I'm already a Jew and I'm a perfect Jew, then why do I need Judaism? Why do I need to study Torah? Why do I need to do a mitzvah? I'm already there. And the answer is, you're right. Judaism is not what makes you a Jew, but Judaism is what helps you express who you really are. So I'll give you an example. Think about the greatest artists, the most talented people, Beethoven, Mozart, Bach, Michelangelo, these people, which talented people. Did they learn their talent, or were they born with that talent? What would you say? It's obvious. They're born, right? You could study a little bit how to play music, you know what I'm saying? But to be somebody on that level, you're born with it. But what type of shame would it be? What type of crime would it be if Mozart simply never went to college, never went to music school, and just simply never developed his skill? And somebody who's a world-class talent that lives on in infamy or history, which just simply he would never develop it. It would be a shame. It would be a crime, right? It would be a shanda. If this is who you are, then of course the best thing is to express that, to allow that to spill forth. Don't let it just be in the subconscious, bring it out to your consciousness. So Judaism is not what makes a Jew a Jew. It doesn't make you any more Jewish, but it helps you consciously live a life that is in truth, that is in alignment, that is in synchronization with your essence, with who you really are. So that is really that's the relationship between a Jew and Judaism. A synchronized Jew expresses his or her Jewishness through their behavior, through their belief, through believing in God, and through doing things. But failure to do so doesn't affect one bit your Jewish status. And that is this question over here. Let's put it down over here. Do I have to believe in God to be Jewish? The answer is no. Jewish identity is dependent on the soul, not on your belief. And that is for our first question tonight. Any questions before we move on? All right, let's move on to question number 2. Dear friends, is it kosher to have doubts about God? Is it kosher to have doubts about God? So, this is a question that I think haunts some people, especially people who consider themselves religious. Young people, teenagers struggle with this. You could have people who are raised in good Jewish homes, and they were raised with belief in God, and all of a sudden one day something happens to them and their faith is challenged. And it's not just a question, it's not just an intellectual question, it's not just an emotional question, but it confuses them a lot. And it haunts them. 1 second, if I have these doubts, then do I really believe? Maybe I'm just a fraud. What does it say about me as a Jew if I have doubts about my core faiths, about my core beliefs? Does it mean that my whole faith is not authentic, is not really that strong? So it's an important question to address. If somebody believes in God, then what's the place of questions? Does belief mean they have to remain naive your whole life? No questions. Don't ask. No doubts. So how does somebody deal with the fact that they believe or they want to believe, they would like to consider themselves a believer, and all of a sudden they have doubts, they have questions. And if you think about it, it should make sense that if somebody has strong faith, they should have no doubts. And if you have doubts, that means you have a very weak faith. So what's type of this relationship? And is there a problem if somebody has doubts about God? That's going to be our question right now. I want to share with you a story. It's a Chabad story, and it's a story that the Rebbe repeated quite often. It's a very beautiful story. It's a deep story. So here's the story. The story is about the third Chabad Rebbe. His name was Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson. It's the exact same name as the more recent Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson. Lived about 180 years ago, was his years of leadership of the Chabad Hasidic community. And once one of his followers, a Chassid, walked into his room and he was very bothered. He said, Rebbe, I'm a Hasidic Jew, I'm a religious Jew, I'm a pious Jew, but I have these doubts about God. I have these big doubts. I have doubts in my faith. So the Rebbe turns to him and says, no, so what's the problem? He says, what's the problem? What do you mean, what's the problem? I have doubts. I'm supposed to believe, I have doubts. That's my problem. He says, no, so what's the problem? he's like taking a vat. I don't understand. This is a real problem. And the Rebbe keeps on pressing him. So what's the problem? Like, just explain to me. What exactly is your problem? Why are you so worried? So you have doubts. So what? And he blurts out, but I'm a Jew. He said, Aber ich bin a Yid. I'm a Yid. And the Rebbe tells him, oh, if so, it's okay. That's the story. It's a little bit of a cryptic story. What's the meaning of the story? This guy, this chassid comes to the Rebbe and says, I have doubts. And the Rebbe says, what's the problem? And he says, what's the problem? I'm a Jew. Oh, if so, then there's no problem. If so, it's okay. When we talk about faith and doubts in faith, it's very important to define what even is faith and where does faith come from? What's faith? If you want to be cynical, what's faith? Faith is just a naive belief that you believe, just like people believe in Santa Claus, like just your parents tell you that this is what we believe in. And because you're born within that family, within a certain culture, you simply buy in because it's always more convenient to buy in than buy out. And maybe in your teenage years, you get to make a choice if you're going to hold on to this belief or if you're going to discard it. And you choose to keep it. And okay, I'm a Jew. This is the way I was born. And by the way, many times when people start having like these, like a period of doubt, they wonder, one second, if I was born into another religious family, if I was born into a Christian family, if I was born into a Hindu family, I'd probably believe the exact same way I believe now. Right? It's like, am I just being naive? Am I just buying into Bubba Mises, right? My grandma's tales, that this is what they say, we just believe. What's faith? Where does faith come from? Is it an intellect? Is it the product of the mind? That we hear it, we conceptualize it, we understand it, we make a rational choice. Yeah, I think there's something worth believing in. What exactly is faith? So, what's faith? Faith, according to Judaism, and the teachings of Hasidus really go to town with this concept. Faith has nothing to do with your intellect. Faith is not a product of your intelligence, of your mind. No connection, nothing to do. Faith is simply the reality of your soul. It is a sixth sense, a sense from the soul, that just tells a Jew that there is a God and that I'm connected with that God. The same way when a baby is born, it's an intuition that I exist and that I have needs and I'm going to go after my needs, and they don't have to think about it, right? Babies don't have to think, by the way, I exist. And if I want to continue to exist, I need to eat food. So therefore, I need to start crying for my food. It's just an intuition. Your existence is an intuition. You didn't have to read a book to tell you, by the way, you exist. You should believe in your existence. It's not. It's inborn. That's what faith is. That's what faith is. It's not a product of study. It's not a product of being smart. It's not about being a scholar. Faith is essentially simple. It's very simple. It's not complex faith. You can learn about faith, but faith is very simple. Now, what's the proof of this? It's an unbelievable fact of Jewish history. Now, our dark Jewish history offered us an unbelievable fact. It's really extraordinary. It doesn't get the attention that it deserves. Now, throughout history, Jews, too often than we should have had to, we faced a choice to either get killed for our beliefs or to convert. Right before I told you the story where the church offered money, that's always a cycle. First they come with love, and when they see that it doesn't work, then they come with hate. First they come with kindness, then they come with violence. It's always a pattern. Spanish Inquisition was the exact same way. First they came and tried being nice to the Jews. Come, we'll let you in. And then eventually it always goes into violence. So Jews throughout history and throughout every area where Jews lived in the diaspora had to face this choice. Kiss the cross or kiss the sword. You pick. And something which is unbelievable, a consistency throughout Jewish history, is that Jews chose death. Easily. It was an easy choice. To the point that you could say it is a proven given, and we could all assume, God forbid we should never have to face that choice, but we should all assume that if theoretically somebody would come and give us that ultimatum, die as a Jew or live in another faith, that you would all of a sudden find that inner courage to say, I'd rather die. I'm not giving this up. It's a fact. It's a fact of history. And what does that tell us? Let's read this text. This text is from the Tanya. For all those that join our Tanya class or know about the Tanya from our classes, we love the Tanya. But this is from the Tanya. Text 4, page 115. Frida, would you like to read? 115, text 4.
Jewish. Excuse me.
We're doing, yeah. Thomas. Let me see what.
Even the most irreverent and sinful,
This one is here.
even the most irreverent and sinful Jews typically surrender their lives to sanctify God's name. They are prepared to suffer harsh torture rather than denounce the one God, even if they are morally uncultivated, uneducated, and ignorant of God's greatness. Even concerning the little they do know, they give it little serious thought. So they aren't giving up their lives as a result of intellectual appreciation or deep thinking about God. Instead, without any intellectual appreciation or careful thinking, they give up their lives, for they consider it impossible to portray the one God by lack of any reasoning.
So there's two pieces here that I want to point out to you. Number one, that it was consistent. It wasn't just great scholars. That's easy to ask a big scholar, to ask the zealots to give up their life. That's easy. But to ask of the uneducated, of the irreverent, for the Jews who never cared, all of a sudden now they're showing up and being, oh, we're ready to die. That's a very big thing. And the next thing this text points out to us, that it was never a conclusion of a logical argument. It was never like, oh, I know this and I know that, so therefore I'm going to give up my life. It was instinctive. It was an instinct. It was like this rush of adrenaline. I'm going to die for this. I'm going to die. Today, because we live in a time where we're never kind of pushed into the corner, we don't experience this rush of faith, like literally a rush of adrenaline that says, I cannot give up on this. I'm going to die right now. Even though my whole life I'd never cared about faith, but I'm going to die right now. But it's safe to assume, if history is any precedent, literally 99% of the time, this is documented. Jews, religious, not religious, men, women, children, every level of education, gave up their lives happily. Unbelievable thing. And even in the Holocaust, there are so many stories that bring this out. That even the Jews who were totally not religious and totally secular, and like in a moment of truth, were willing to give up their lives. What's the explanation? The explanation is like this. Faith is a product of the soul. Our soul is a piece of God, and every single Jew has that soul. And that soul is not contingent upon your religiosity, your observance, your knowledge, your Torah study, your scholarship, nothing to do with that. And therefore, every Jew believes. And if somebody says that they don't believe, they're lying. I'm not saying that in a way to belittle them. The opposite. It's a compliment. Every Jew believes. Now, so where do doubts come from? Here's where doubts come from. The soul says, and the soul knows that it believes. It's a truth. It's an axiom within you. But sometimes the mind has a difficult time wrapping its head around that truth of the soul. I have a hard time accepting that. Sometimes the heart aches and has a hard time accepting it. And that's where we'll have our doubts, and that's where we'll have an internal struggle. But those doubts never mean that our faith is not intact. And the doubts never mean that our faith is compromised. No. Doubts simply mean that your heart or your mind are having a little bit of a hard time aligning itself with the faith. Okay, but that doesn't mean that there's a problem with the faith. That means there's a problem with the mind. You understand? So let's get back to the story of the Rebbe. So what did the Rebbe tell the Chassid? So you have doubts in faith. So what's the problem? So he says, but I'm a Jew. So Rebbe said, oh, if so, there's no problem. You know you're a Jew. Meaning, you know you believe. You're just having a difficult time making sense of it all. No problem. It's not a big problem. This is not an emergency. So no problem. Study, think about it, give yourself time. You could work through the doubts, but just you could do it in a place of confidence. I'm totally healthy. My faith is healthy. My Jewishness is healthy. There's no problem here. And we're all human. We all have a brain. We all have a heart. And it makes sense that sometime in life, we'll go through a difficult time with our faith. And that's fine. That's very natural. So I'll tell you here. I'm wondering if any of you were there then. I don't think any of you were there. My very first year here that I was giving classes, I just started offering these JLI courses. And I did a spring course. I remember it was my first spring course. It was titled, What Is? 6-week course. It was the deepest course I've ever done. I, in fact, turned off a lot of people. After the first 2 weeks, I lost half my crowd because it was so deep, and I wasn't as experienced as a Torah teacher. And it overwhelmed people. It was an unbelievably deep course, but it was very, very special, very special. In a certain way, there was something very unique about that course. Teaching the deepest ideas of Hasidus, of Jewish philosophy, in a very real, deep way. It wasn't watered down. But in any case, in my morning class, I had somebody registered who I didn't know. His name was Herman, an 87-year-old Jew who lives here in Metro Detroit. Herman, 87 years old. So now he's what? He's 91, 92. Last I checked, he's still living. I usually go visit him like once a year. At least, once or twice a year. So Herman comes in and he walks in with attitude. He didn't come to learn. He signed up, paid the registration fee. And he sat like right where you're sitting, right to my, he wasn't sitting in the back of the room. He sat right to my right. And he walks in with attitude. And whatever I say, he's there. He never gave me like eye contact. He's there, making his faces, twitching his nose. And he's challenging me. How do you know that? What's the proof that what you're saying is even true? And he was trying to like egg me on. He was trying to get me nervous. He wouldn't call me, he didn't call me Rabbi Dubov. He didn't even call me Levi Dubov. He just said Dubov. But I had patience for him, And then after class, he came over to me and he just wouldn't stop talking to me. And what he would basically say is, this was his pitch. Every time he would say, listen, I'm very bothered. I'm a Jew. And he would always pull out, he had a Magen David necklace. I'm a Jew, I'm a proud Jew, but I don't believe in God. And he would then go into the Holocaust and science, he had all of his, every week. And every week I'd I'd have the patience literally for 40 minutes. I would hear him out. And after at the first class, I said, would you like to put on tefillin? And he was like, tefillin? I haven't put on tefillin in decades. I don't put on tefillin. I don't believe. But next week he comes back. He comes back to hear he's again there with attitude and again, exact same speech that he for 40 minutes he comes does the exact same spiel. I asked him to put on tefillin. He says, no way, I haven't put on tefillin in decades. Third class, third class was about God. The class was titled, What is God? So that really was a trigger for him, that triggered him big time. He wasn't. Fourth class, he's consistent. He was a good student, comes back every week. After the fourth class, I say, he tells me his whole thing. I say, Herman, I just don't understand you. Maybe you could help explain to me. You're 87 years old. You say that you don't believe in God. No problem. Move on with life. You're 87. You're schlepping out to come here, to have to sit here and debate with me and this and quibble with me. Like, just move on with life. You say you don't believe, move on. I said, Herman, do you believe in aliens? He said, no. I said, okay. I don't either. Does that bother you? Is your life now disturbed that you don't believe in aliens? No. You decide you don't believe in aliens, so you moved on with life. Who cares about aliens now? I don't believe in them. So whenever you decided that you don't believe in God 20, 30 years ago, you should have moved on. Like, what are you doing here? You're making yourself Meshuggah, you're making me Meshuggah. He was floored by that question. He was in utter shock. He says, I don't know. It hit him like a ton of bricks. He's like, I don't know. I really don't know. You're right. And he said, you tell me. What am I doing here? I said, what's wrong with you? You're 87, you're an old man. I said, listen, Herman, you want to really know what I think? I said, you believe in God, and you know that you believe in God. What's your problem? Your problem is that your mind and your heart have a hard time accepting that. So you feel that tension. And the tension is real. Okay, so it's a challenge. How could you get your heart and your mind to accept and be comfortable and to be settled with your faith? But you believe. He didn't he didn't respond to that. But I asked him if he wants to put on tefillin, and he put on tefillin. If I'm not mistaken, I think it was the first time ever. Yeah, it's the first time in his life. 87. He put on tefillin. The next time I saw him, he already said no. But he did it once. Said the Shema. And as a young rabbi, it taught me a lot. It was an unbelievable experience. Like, here's a Jew who himself didn't even know how to diagnose his own problem, but this is what it was. A Jew believes. A Jew believes. And the Alter Rebbe in Tanya has a beautiful line that the Rebbe quoted so often, that even a Jew who is sinning and totally couldn't care less, he is absolutely loyal and one with God at his essence. If you could peel back the layers, he's just as connected and loyal and united with God as the greatest saint, as Moses. Okay, it's not every Jew feels it always, but that's the truth. So really, getting back to our question over here, is it kosher to have doubts about God? Totally kosher. Not only totally kosher, it shouldn't bother you. There's no problem with your faith. Nothing could compromise a Jew's faith, but we could sometimes go through a struggle. I'll tell you one more story. And a similar thing. A friend of mine, he's older than me, but a friend of mine, who's a Chabad rabbi, he told me once that he had a family who was not religious, not observant, and the family started getting very close to Judaism and got involved with the shul. And it was like an energy in the family. The whole family was getting closer to Judaism, and they put up mezuzahs in the house, and they bought tefillin, and they started lighting Shabbos candles. They would come to services, and they really warmed up to Judaism, started coming, and all of a sudden tragedy hits. They lost a child. They had to bury a child. And all of a sudden they went cold turkey. They would never show up again. They would never accept any of the rabbi's calls. And the rabbi understood that this was very traumatic for them. It was horrible. A few months later, the family shows up to the Chabad house, literally with a box of all their Jewish stuff, all their mezuzahs, all their tefillin, all their Torah books that they bought. And they said, Rabbi, please don't take this personally, but we're out. We're done. Please accept this all back. Give it to somebody who could use it. And that's it. It was a nice run here, but we cannot believe anymore. We are out. And they were crying. They were very emotional when they came. So the rabbi said, listen, I respect you, I understand you. I'm not going to judge you. I just want to share with you one thing. I know that you're going to be back. He said, how do I know that you're going to be back? Because you're emotional. You care too much. He says, to say that I don't believe in something is meant to be a very dispassionate statement. I don't believe in UFOs. It's not meant to be a very passionate stance. I believe the earth is round and not flat. If you don't believe in a flat earth, it's not meant to really, it shouldn't get you emotional. You coming and saying, I don't believe in this anymore, and then emotionally parting from that. He said, listen, you need your space. You're going through a test, and I'm not going to judge you because I never went through that test. Give yourself as much time as you need, whatever healing process you need. But I just want you to know, there'll be a day when you're going to want to come back, and my door is open. That's it. Did they come back yet? I don't know. But that's what we're talking about over here. And you really see it. A Jew, even if he tells you I don't believe, the signs, all the hints and all the clues that really this Jew believes good and well are always there. You just need to look a little bit. Just like our old friend Herman showed us. That's about this question. That's question number 2. Is it kosher to have doubts about God? We went through the idea that every single Jew is willing to give up their life for God, which is the proof that every Jew really believes, and that the doubts don't mean that you have a problem with your belief. It simply means you have a problem, let's use the word again, synchronizing your belief with your conscious knowledge, with your conscious feelings. That's it. All right, moving right along. Question number 3. How are we doing? Any questions? Doing good? Okay, smooth sailing over here. Question number 3, why must I fear God? I'm going to tell you a little story. I want to tell you a little story because it connects with really the first question, but the first 2 questions were connected. I recently heard this story for the first time, so I want to share it with you. I don't think it's famous, but here's an interesting question. Here's an interesting story, very interesting story. In 1981, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Rebbe caught wind that the Reform movement was planning, the movement headquarters was planning on putting out a public statement denouncing and decrying Chabad. And it was going to be a very strongly worded statement anti-Chabad. It was on the agenda that all the leadership, and it was going to be the official denomination's belief and stance, very anti-Chabad. The Rebbe caught wind of this, and the Rebbe asked one of his staff to see if there's anybody who has connections who can, try to deal with the problem, because the Rebbe understood that it wouldn't be good for the work of Chabad. Of course, it would hurt the growth of Chabad and the good work of Chabad around the world if reform would come out like that. It wouldn't be a helpful controversy. So, is there anybody who Chabad knows who can maybe put some sway? All right, guys, I'm telling you real inside information over here. This is not public knowledge. So one of the Rebbe's staff got on it and tried to see if there's anybody who knows anybody. And that's what happened. The Chabad rabbi in Worcester, Massachusetts, his name was Rabbi Fogelman. Rabbi Fogelman's neighbor was an elderly woman named Mrs. Schindler. And Mrs. Schindler's son was Rabbi, what's the name? Who was like the leader of the Reform movement in the 80s? No, Stephen Wise was before.
I can't remember.
But you know what I'm talking about? Schindler, Rabbi Schindler. And he was the head of the Reform movement. Very, very powerful person. His mother was next door neighbor to this Chabad rabbi. And the Chabad rabbi took very good care of this elderly Mrs. Schindler. And the Schindler family was very, very thankful to this Chabad rabbi. And so the Rebbe's office contacted Rabbi Fogelman and said, can you try to pull some sway with Rabbi Schindler to pull it off the agenda? And that's what happened. He picked up the phone, called Rabbi Schindler, and said, I want to talk with you. I want to meet with you. I don't think this will do good for the Jewish people. And Rabbi Schindler agreed, and Rabbi Schindler pulled it off the agenda. It didn't happen. Okay, so it never happened. Well, wonderful. Rabbi Fogelman continues a relationship with Rabbi Schindler. And they correspond, they write letters back and forth. And at one point, Rabbi Schindler, in one of his letters to Rabbi Fogelman, says, I just want you to know, Rabbi Fogelman, Oh, now 1 second. Also, after this event, Rabbi Fogelman invited Rabbi Schindler to join a Farbrengen with the Rebbe, a Hasidic gathering. And Rabbi Schindler agreed. He brought his son along. And it was a very powerful, a thing. Here's the Rebbe, and standing in the room right across the Rebbe was the head of the Reform movement, Rabbi Schindler. It was a statement. They made a statement. Okay. But at one point, Rabbi Schindler writes to Rabbi Fogelman, he says, I want you to know that my friendship with you is purely personal, but not with the Chabad movement, because I cannot acquaint myself with a movement that considers me less of a Jew, considers me less Jewish. All right. Rabbi Fogelman copied this letter to the Rebbe. As soon as the Rebbe got this letter, the Rebbe sent the letter back to Rabbi Fogelman. And the Rebbe said, how is it possible that in 1981, this is not 1955, Chabad has been already around and kicking and has already been an empire by then. How could it be that somebody so influential, somebody so within the Jewish world, like Rabbi Schindler, thinks that Chabad would think that about him? How are we failing so badly at our messaging that he could think that we look at him as less of a Jew than somebody else because he's Reform? How are we failing so badly? How are we not getting our message out better? And the Rebbe told Rabbi Fogelman that he should write an op-ed and send it to every single Jewish newspaper in the country to clarify his mistake. And Rabbi Fogelman did that. He wrote an op-ed which was titled "A Jew is a Jew is a Jew is a Jew," and he sent it to over 100 newspapers. And I wonder if the Detroit Jewish News published it. Probably look it up, right? We'll look it up on the archives after, because he says they. What's the message of the story? Well, unfortunately, a lot of Jews think that. Oh, religious Jews look at me as less Jewish, right? Oh, I'll tell you. My first year here, I'll tell you another little story, a little anecdote. My first year here, that I came here to Detroit to establish the Chabad at Bloomfield Hills, I met a Jew, a young Jew, quite successful. And he was really not nice to me. He was really not nice. I was meeting with him and he was just being snappy at me. Who needs another Jewish organization here? No one needs it. We're so saturated with Jewish organizations. It's too much. What are you going to do? No one needs you. He was just being very negative. I didn't have a very good feeling, but I was like, I held to my guns and, I told him whatever I told him. And that was the meeting. He never returned any of my calls and he ignored any of my communications from then. We met in September. I came in the summer, July. Just around the same time I met you, I met him.
Yeah.
September. Did I tell you who this was?
No.
No?
Maybe.
Maybe I told you. You would be the only person I'll tell who this happened to. Okay. 6 months later, it's before Pesach. And one of the Rebbe's campaigns is that we should make sure that every single Jew has shmur matzah before Passover. So I give out shmur matzah. And I realized that I'm in his building. I'm in the exact same office building. I was bringing matzah to somebody else. And he's right there. So I run down to my car. I get shmur matzah and I just crash his office. And I say, before Passover, I wanted to bring you some shmur matzah. And he said, oh, wow, that's so thoughtful of you. Thank you. That evening, all of a sudden I get a notification on my phone. This guy has accepted your friend request on Facebook that I sent him 6 months ago. All of a sudden, he's like, oh, all of a sudden we're friends. So I'm like, all right, I think he's ready to, I think I'm ready to re-engage. So right after Pesach, I picked up the phone, I called him. I said, I want to meet with you. He says, sure, anytime. We make a meeting, a date, we meet. I walk into his office, he says, Rabbi Dubov, before we talk, I need to ask you something. He says, I'm Reform. And I look at Reconstructionist Jews as not Jewish. It's a joke. That's Jewish, that's not Jewish. But I'm Reform. The conservative probably look at me and think I'm not Jewish. He says, you're Orthodox. What do you think of me? And he was basically testing me. He says, if you don't think I'm Jewish, just get out of my office. But I had a chance to tell him what we just learned earlier. God forbid, nothing compromises the status of you as a Jew. All these terms and titles. We'll get to that a little bit later today in a moment. Reform, conservative. What difference does that make? More religious, less religious. A Jew is a Jew. I'm a Jew. You're a Jew. He heard that. We're friends. From then, he puts on tefillin once a month. I visited him first thing in the morning at his office. He puts on tefillin. That's he heard that. I was like, okay, I could be friends with you. But that's what was bothering him 6 months ago. He was kind of being all aggressive because, he was insecure. Like, does this guy even think I'm Jewish to begin with? And such an important message. A Jew is a Jew is a Jew is a Jew. Your soul's intact. Your faith's intact. At the essence, every single Jew is right there. Nothing is ever compromised. Okay. That was a little bit on going off on a tangent over here, but let's get back on track. We have 2 more questions here to talk about. Why must I fear God is question number 3. So let's talk a little bit about fearing God. Okay, here's a story. A thief breaks into a house. And all of a sudden, while he's stealing from the house, he hears a voice. God is watching you. God is watching me. Who said that? He opens up his flashlight. No one's there. He keeps on doing his thing. I was going to say, I just want you to know, God is watching you. All of a sudden, he sees there's a parrot in a cage. He says, who's speaking? Is that you? Parrot says, yeah, it was me. He says, who do you think you are? Oh, who am I? He says, I'm Moses. He says, you're Moses? Which Meshuggah would give a parrot such a name? He says, probably the same Meshuggah that named the Rottweiler God. You got it? All right. All right. So what's the idea with fearing God? There's an idea in Judaism that there's a relationship between a Jew and God. A Jew is meant to be in a relationship. And this idea of fear. And a lot of people are like, what's up with the fear? You need to fear God? What does that even mean? So let's read this in text 8a. We're not reading all the text over here, as usual. I want to leave you with, there's always more to read. Okay, but text 8a, let's take a look at this. This is Maimonides. And Maimonides, this is one of the first things he says in his Code of Jewish Law, his magnum opus. Where are we up to, Max?
Yeah.
Okay, so read text 8a, 121.
It is a mitzvah to love and fear this glorious and awesome God, as the verses state. And you shall love your God, Deuteronomy 6:5, and fear your God, Deuteronomy 6:13.
There you have it. You shall fear your God, Deuteronomy 6:13. Is that a coincidence? 6:13, right? 6:13 is the number of mitzvahs in the Torah. So Deuteronomy 6:13 says, fear your God. Okay, I don't know. Is there a connection? I don't know. Okay, but in any case, listen, let's be real over here. I think anybody will tell you that if in your relationship there's an element of fear, welcome in. How you doing, Jeff? All right.
Sorry.
No, don't apologize. And kudos to you for coming late, even if, yeah, okay, very, very good. Come on in. Welcome. If there's an element of fear in your relationship, let's talk about it in the context of a marriage. If a wife has fear of her husband, or a husband has fear of the wife, I think we would all agree that's called a toxic relationship, and probably not a very healthy one, right? Fear in a relationship doesn't sound right. So what's this business that God wants us to fear him? Does God want to be in a toxic relationship with us, right? Fear destroys relationships. What's up with this? So if we want to understand what fear is doing in Judaism, fear is doing in our relationship with Judaism, we have to understand, what does fear even mean? What does fear mean? Why does fear have such a negative connotation in the context of a context of relationships? So here's a definition given by the American Psychological Association, the APA. This is how the APA says the definition of fear is. Fear is a basic and intense emotion aroused by the detection of an imminent threat. So we perceive a threat and we become very scared. Intense emotion aroused by a threat. So yes, that doesn't sound very healthy. And that's why fear in the context of relationships has a very negative connotation. It's considered toxic. All right, I'll tell you another joke, okay? Another parrot joke. Here we go. There's a guy who owned a parrot, and the parrot was being very naughty. He was really not clean, didn't speak clean. And it was horrible. He would bring company over, and this parrot would just, he would say things. It was so inappropriate. And so this guy goes to the veterinarian and says, you gotta help me out over here. My parrot, he's out of whack. Totally not in line. He says things. So the veterinarian said, I'll tell you, it's very simple. This is the trick. Take your parrot. He says, do you have a freezer at home? He says, yeah, of course I have a freezer. Take a parrot, put him in the freezer for 60 seconds. Try that out. All right. So he goes home. He says, parrot, you come with me. Opens up the freezer, puts him in. 60 seconds later, takes the parrot out. The parrot comes out and says, you know what? I've just made the decision that it was not okay the way I was speaking. I will never do that again. I'll be speaking appropriately from now on. And this man can't believe it. 60 seconds in the freezer and this parrot is falling in line. And the parrot says, can I ask you one question? Just one question. So the guy says, sure. He says, what did the turkey do wrong? So that's the motivation of fear. All right. Okay. So what is fear doing in Judaism? Is that really what we want? So this is how the APA defines fear. Let us now look at how Judaism defines fear in the context of our relationship with God. Let's see if it's similar, the same, something different. Text 8b, page 122. Would you like to read, Marion? Again, from Maimonides. This is how Maimonides defines, what does it mean to have fear of God? This is what he says.
What is the way to love and fear God? When a person contemplates God's wondrous deeds and creations and appreciates his infinite wisdom that defies all comparison, they will immediately love, praise, and glorify God, yearning with tremendous desire to know God's great name. When they reflect on these matters, they will immediately tremble in awe and fear, aware that they are but tiny, humble, and dull creatures of slight, petty wisdom before his perfect knowledge.
Okay. There's a little bit of a different definition. I want to put it up over here. This is Maimonides. What does Maimonides say fear is? It's an emotion that stems from an appreciation of how great God is and how small we are in comparison. It's not the intense emotion aroused by the detection of a threat. It's appreciating God's greatness, how small we are in the presence of God, and having this, being awestruck, being in this awesome environment, being overwhelmed by the awesomeness of God. So in Hebrew, it's called fear, but I think would maybe be more appropriate to name it, not fear, but maybe awe, the awe of God, and maybe a sense of respect, deep admiration, and overwhelming respect. This is what it is. If you think, I want you to think about a time when you felt starstruck in the presence of somebody great, somebody who you really appreciate, somebody who you respect, somebody who you admire, and obviously you're standing in their presence. And I remember when I was a kid, the number one music star in the Jewish Orthodox world, his name is Avraham Fried. He's a Chabad guy, very, very talented and very famous singer. It's like as a kid, especially, he was literally the celebrity, Avraham Fried. And Avraham Fried went to yeshiva with my father. So once I was walking in the streets of Brooklyn, Crown Heights, and Avraham Fried was walking up to shul, and so my father and him were talking, walking up Kingston Avenue. I was standing to my father. I couldn't breathe. I was like probably 9 or 10 years old. I literally couldn't. I couldn't contain myself. I was like, I just didn't even know what to do. I couldn't say anything. I was frozen. We're walking with Avraham Fried. That was my 10-year-old version of being totally starstruck. But think about the time, imagine a time where there's somebody who is so powerful, so big, and all of a sudden you're standing in his or her presence. It's a very overwhelming feeling. It's a mix of very strong admiration, respect, and there's a lot of humility. You lose a little bit of that sense of ego. It's a different context. And that's what Judaism wants us to have with God. Not just a sense of love, but a sense of fear. Not fear of a threat, not fear that God's going to punish you. By the way, that's really not Jewish. Judaism is not about heaven and hell. We believe in heaven and hell, but it's not a motivation in life. When we speak of fear of God, it does not mean fear of punishment. It doesn't mean fear of retribution. That's really not. That's like primitive. Fear means that you really feel the presence of God and you live your life in that way. Every kid, the moment that the principal walks into the classroom, you stiffen up, right? Do you only stiffen up if you were making trouble just before and you're scared they're going to get caught? You stiffen up just because this is the principal. I'm a great kid. I'm not getting in trouble. I know the principal likes me. It's so in awe if it's a good principal, has a good command, and all the children feel it. It feels so special when the principal gives you attention. That's what Judaism wants us to have. Our relationship with God shouldn't just be love, it should be fear. The real sense that God is right there in your presence. Let's read this in text 9. Text 9, again from the Tanya, gives us a practical meditation. Jeff, you didn't get a chance to read. Text 9, page 123.
Contemplate God's greatness and his dominion that envelops all worlds, both higher and lower, and how he is invested in all the worlds while simultaneously transcending them all. And God is standing above you. His glory fills the entire world, and yet he observes you and searches your heart to see if you're serving him appropriately. Accordingly, you should serve him with awe and reverence as if standing before a king. Contemplate this at length to the extent of your intellectual capacity and available time.
All right. Fear, so some people say if it doesn't mean fear, it means awe, it means respect, just say awe. No, fear means it's very real. Fear is a palpable emotion. You can you could go to the Grand Canyon and you're in awe, and okay, it doesn't change your life. You move on. Fear means it's a presence. That's what Judaism wants. Feel that God is in your presence. The first thing it says in Jewish law begins. The first opening part of Jewish law is the morning when you wake up. That's the starting point of Jewish law. You wake up in the morning. Okay, how does a Jew live their day? The first thing Jewish law tells you is that when you wake up, first thing, think about the fact that God is literally standing over your bed. You're right there in God's presence. And get moving from within that attitude. If you're sleeping, and all of a sudden and there's a great king standing over you, it shakes you up. You're not going to sit there and turn over, and then it's real. It's not that God's going to punish you. It's just that God brought you into the world for another day. God's in a relationship with you. God's with you. God's right there. It's an empowering thought. It's also a little bit of a scary thought. Jewish law wants every single Jew to wake up feeling in the presence of God. That's fear, but it's not fear of a threat. It's the fear of standing in the presence of God. I read online a great little story from a guy. His name is Rabbi Tzvi Freeman. He's a prolific writer. He writes for Chabad.org. Very often you'll see he's so talented, unbelievable writer. Tzvi Freeman. Tzvi Freeman is a rabbi. He lives in Toronto, and he says he once bumped into a guy. You heard of it? It was a wonderful little episode. He met a guy, like a real mafianer, a real tough guy. And this guy in Toronto says, I've never, ever felt fear in my life besides once. Only one time. And he says, and I'm a guy, I've seen it all. When he was a child, his parents put him into a foster home because he was just a crazy kid. He was a driver for the mafia in New York City. He's really been around the block. When he moved to Toronto, he worked for the police force undercover to arrest the biggest criminals. So he would go undercover, and hang out with criminals. He's seen it all. He said, I've never felt fear in my life. Only one time. He says, one time I got an assignment to drive Golda Meir, Prime Minister of Israel, Golda Meir. She visited Toronto, to drive her from here to there. And that was fear. When I drove her, that was fear. Zvi Freeman asked him, well, what happened? Golda Meir was holding a gun to your head the whole time. He said, no, you're ridiculous. Golda Meir is sitting in the back seat. He said, I was sweating like a racehorse. It's a deep story. There's fear that you're in a dangerous situation. There's Golda Meir is in the back seat. That's fear. I'm sweating. I'm not just driving. I'm not chilling. I'm as tense as there's that very palpable, real feeling of the presence of somebody great. And that's what Judaism wants us to have with God. That's what awe is. So we speak about fear of God. Doesn't mean you're scared of God smiting you, fear of retribution. It's simply an awareness, an active awareness that you stand in the presence of God. Okay, but at this point, I want to ask the next follow-up question, right? Let's put this up over here. Realizing that this awe-inspiring God is watching you at all times leads you to a constant awareness and then awe, like an overwhelming awe of his presence. The question now is simply, let's put this up over here. Okay, so fear doesn't mean fear of a threat, it means awe. But why can't we just stick to love? Love God. You have to also fear God. Why is love not enough? A Jew loves God. Okay, you have to fear God. You have to have this pressure that you're in the overwhelming presence of God. Why is love not enough? Why did Judaism want us to have a relationship with God that also includes fear? So I want to share this with you, at least briefly. And let's talk a little bit about our own relationships. All right. Let's talk about a relationship of a married couple. As we've learned earlier, it's a good model of a relationship between a Jew and God, especially because that's what we see, right? The whole Song of Songs is a metaphor for the relationship between a Jew and God, and it gives the relationship as a young man and woman who are deeply in love, right? Which is really unbelievable. It's really unbelievable if you think about it. But okay, what does a marriage look like with love and no awe and no respect? What does that look like? And do we like such relationships? So let me give you a little bit of an example. What does a relationship of love with no awe and respect sound like? This is what it sounds like. The wife asks the husband, can you please, before you go to work, can you please take out the garbage? And he goes to work and doesn't take out the garbage. He kisses her before leaving. I love you, dear. Okay. She texts in the middle of the day. I need you home by 5 o'clock. I have something going on tonight. I'm overwhelmed. You can't, just don't stay in the office late. 5 o'clock comes and goes. He's nowhere to show up. He rolls in 9 p.m. But he says, my dear wife, I couldn't stop thinking about you the whole afternoon. I just can't wait to get back home. And on my way back home, I passed by. I saw somebody selling flowers on the street corner. I couldn't pass by that. I buy a beautiful bouquet of flowers. What's going on over here? Is that a good relationship? And that goes on day in, day out. Lots of love. Love is not missing. What's missing? You see, love is what motivates you to do something for your lover. I'm going to do something for you. I want to be with you. I want to spend time with you. I'm going to get you gifts. I want to talk with you. I want to connect. I want to bond with you. I want to give you love. I want to get your love. But the feeling of I will not do something for you, I'm going to control myself for you, that doesn't come from love. The idea of boundaries, the idea of respect, the idea of I don't like this, I don't feel it, but I'm going to do it anyways for the relationship, for you. That doesn't come from love. That comes from awe, respect, and fear, right? You have to understand what the word fear means. Right? It doesn't mean somebody's scared of a threat. It means there's a real sense of respect for this relationship. You're in awe of your spouse. You really respect the relationship. You know what else what love looks like? Just love. I love you. I love you, my wife. I love you. I love you. I can't love you enough, but I also love another woman. I love more than one woman. I've got lots of love to give. I hang out with more than one woman. I have lots of love. Love doesn't set boundaries. Love doesn't commit you to the relationship. You know, ask anybody in any relationship, ask any wife, if they appreciate love that doesn't come with respect and doesn't come with boundaries and doesn't come with the fear of the relationship. And the answer is not only is the love not appreciated, it's not wanted at that point. I don't want such love. Love is only as good as it could be within a committed relationship. The commitment, the deep commitment of a relationship comes through awe and respect and admiration and humility. And that is not the product of love. You know, this is my own little theory. Okay, I'm not. Don't you can quote me on this, but I'll tell you clearly, I'm not quoting Judaism when I say this. All right, but I have a feeling. I'm not that smart. I'm not a psychologist, but this is my little feeling. You know, today it's no secret. Today in the Western world, there's a very high level of divorce rate. You want to know why I think? Of course, you know, you can't oversimplify anything, especially something, you know, in relationships. I think it's because we talk about love too much. Everything's about love. It's very simple. A young couple, two young people, they feel deeply in love. We all know the honeymoon doesn't last forever. So we love and love and love and love. What happens a year from now when you don't feel the love? For a day, for a week, for 2 weeks, for 2 months, for a year? I don't feel the love. So if the whole relationship was about love, we fell in love. Well, guess what? We just fell out of love. And then at a certain point, you realize I don't see myself falling back in love anytime soon. And actually, I think I'm falling in love with somebody else at this point. So it's a very natural progression. Of course, it's not going to last. You know why? Because there's no commitment. There's no strong sense of a boundary that transcends what am I going to, you know, the feeling of love. The humility. Humility doesn't come from love. Humility comes from respect. So why in Judaism is there a need for the fear of God? Because that's what makes it real. That's really what makes it real. Okay, dear friends, we have 3 minutes left. I'm gonna go 3 minutes over time, with your permission. I want to do this quickly. Last question here. Okay. Okay, let's put this up over here. All right, what's the recap? Why must I fear God? So we said 2 points. Number one, fear of God is a deep sense of awe. Right? It wasn't fear of a threat. And ultimately, healthy relationships are built on respect, awe, and fear. Love is beautiful. Love is important. Relationships aren't built on love. Okay, question number 4 for our closing for tonight. Very important question. I'm okay with believing in God, but I'm not religious. Can we still have a relationship? You know, we're running out of time here. Let me just cut straight to the chase. I'll come straight out of the gate. I'll say like this. Your relationship with God has nothing to do with being religious. Absolutely nothing. And I'll even tell you like this, Judaism has nothing to do with you being religious. The whole idea, so what does it mean being religious? Today, it's like a stereotype. I'm religious, I'm not religious. So somebody who's religious looks a certain way, does certain things, dresses a certain way, drives a Toyota Sienna, right? Or a Honda Odyssey, right? That's like, you know, you live somewhere, you live here. Like, you know, there's even the term, you know, you're from, somebody's from or not from. So it's like a box, either fit in the stereotype or you're not in the stereotype. And then there's somebody who's like, not religious. I'm not religious. You know, I'm not religious. So like we kind of tend to think of Jewish life like within that framing. Oh, there's religious people, then there's not religious people. So you probably think I'm religious. And then we kind of created some more box in recent history. Which denomination are you? Are you Orthodox? Are you Reform? Are you conservative? Are you ultra-Orthodox? The media loves that term. There's lots of all these like denominations. Okay, now, what I want to share with you is that I believe that this idea of framing yourself or thinking of yourself in terms of being religious or not religious is not only wrong, not only it's not Jewish, I mean, these are not native framings according to Judaism, I think it's even dangerous. It's just bad. It's a bad idea. I want to put that up over here. At both ends, identifying oneself religiously, which means either as being religious or not religious, is outright dangerous. And I want to share with you why. Both of them lead to a false sense of complacency and like this weird, a stereotype that ends up playing around with you. Let's look at it from both sides. Somebody who says, I'm not religious. I'm not religious. So what do they say? They say, oh, I'm not religious, so why should I do this? Right? They say, if I'm not all in, then what's the point of doing anything? Right? Like somebody says, like, I don't do that. I'm not religious. I'm not that. Someone will ask them, do you want to put on film? They'll say, oh, I'm reformed. What? Are you answering my question? I actually want to put on tefillin. You tell me your denomination. What's the connection? What did I just miss? That's what happens. You kind of say, oh, well, I don't do that. I'm not there. Like, oh, if I was religious, I'd do that. I'm not religious. So that's the problem with identifying as non-religious. But religious people have the exact same problem, the opposite. People who identify as religious, you should know this is a very real problem for what we'll call, like, religious people. But as you can see, we don't like that term. So we're gonna cancel the term religious. Okay, but people who are religious, they have a little bit of like an opposite feeling. They could say, oh, if I look the part, there can't be much wrong with my little misdoings. I'm good, I'm religious. Okay, so I got this little problem. I got that little problem. I'm there, I'm good. I'm part of the community. There's a very strong sense of complacency. Yeah, I'm Jewish, I'm religious. So the whole idea of like religiosity as like an identity, as a stereotype, is really not healthy for a good Jewish life, and it's not real. It's not honest. It's not what Judaism is about. So I want to share with you what Judaism is about. Judaism has nothing to do with being religious or not religious. It's a made-up stereotype. It's really made up. Judaism has one thing and one thing only. It's not about attaining a certain status. Judaism is about a Jew connecting with God through mitzvahs. Every mitzvah connects you with God. It's not about doing enough mitzvahs until you have enough aggregate mitzvahs that the aggregate of all the mitzvahs makes you religious. And if you don't do enough, you didn't make the cut. God is not a frequent flyer program. And Judaism is not a point system where either, you didn't fly enough points, we're kicking you out of the program. Like, it's very real and personal. I'll put it this way. Judaism is not a religion. Judaism is family. Judaism is relationship. Can you imagine somebody saying, I don't talk to my parents that often. The heck with it. I'm not going to Thanksgiving dinner. I don't talk, what's one time going to make a difference? I'm not. Did anybody say that? What are you talking about? Yeah, some people are better with their parents. Some people are not as good. But, there's no problem going once. It's a very meaningful act if you show up once a year. Yeah, of course you can show up twice a year, but it's a problem. You say like, I don't do that. You only say that when you're like stuck in this framing of like, it's about being religious. If you think about it as a relationship, as a family, a Jew's connecting with God. That's all it is. So any framing that makes it about religion is missing the whole point. It's about connecting with God. Let's read this text. All right. And I know we're already going a little bit over time, but we're going to wrap up over here. I think it's a very important and beautiful point. Let's read text 11. Text 11, what is a mitzvah all about? Page 126. Tom, you want to read?
Sure. When you fulfill God's will, your godly soul, your bodily consciousness, and all their expressions are united in perfect unity with God. The union endures forever because God and His will transcends time.
There you have it. You do a mitzvah, you're connecting with God. And we see over here in this text, God is timeless, your connection becomes timeless. Nobody would say there's no value in the one time. I'll tell you something interesting. For those of you who joined our summer course, in our last class, we spoke about the history of by the 6-Day War, of the Lubavitch Rebbe's Tefillin campaign, the very first mitzvah campaign that the Rebbe established, that Chabad became world famous for, was the Tefillin campaign, 1967. And it was absolutely revolutionary. That you should go out to the streets of Manhattan and ask people, are you Jewish? Would you like to put on tefillin? Nobody ever heard of this type of thing before. And it made a lot of waves. And the religious community came out against the Rebbe. They said, this is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. If meeting somebody, you don't even know who they are. There's no follow-up. There's no commitment. Would you like to put on tefillin? Are you Jewish? Let's put on tefillin. Oh, you don't know what tefillin are? It's okay. You don't even know what tefillin are. Let's just put on tefillin. You don't get their number. You don't get any commitment from them. You're not making them religious. What's the point? They even say like you're trivializing Judaism. You're making it cheap. Like if you make somebody religious, then you're doing something. The Rebbe responded like, since when Judaism not making somebody religious? This whole religious thing is just as a modern day. It's like a made up thing. It's really a made up thing. So I'll tell you. Here's the way I think about it. I was once speaking with a college kid, now with a high school kid here in Bloomfield Hills. He had a school assignment for his religions class. He decided to write about Judaism. So he decided it's going to be a Shabbos in an Orthodox home. So he asked me if he could join me for Shabbos. I'm an Orthodox home. I said, of course. So it was wonderful. He joined us. He hung out. He came Friday night. He came Shabbos day. He ate cholent for the first time in his life. He loved it. He told his mom she has to start making cholent. And then afterwards, he interviewed me. I went to his house. And I said, don't call it Shabbos or Orthodox home. Bad title. He said, why? So I said, what do you consider yourself? He says, I'm like Reform conservative, like somewhere in between. I said, you consider me Orthodox, right? Orthodox. I said, those are just made up terms. Those are made up terms. That's not native to Judaism. Judaism doesn't have denominations. It's a made up thing. It's 200 years old. First was Reform, and then out of Reform, there's like a breakaway called conservative. And then other Jews kind of had to find some way to separate themselves from Reform, so they can't put the term Orthodox. None of this is real. So what I told him was, when the Jews came out of Egypt, and the Jews were standing at Mount Sinai, what were the Jews there? He said they were Orthodox. I said, wrong. You know what they were? They were Jews, just Jews. Yeah, I'm sure there are Jews who are more committed, who are less committed, did more, did less. It's not about these titles. You're getting it all wrong. Judaism is a very real and personal program. It's about you connecting with God. Simple as that. Judaism is not about attaining a religious state. Judaism is simply about serving and connecting with God, which is accomplished through a mitzvah. So I want to tell you a story, and then we're going to conclude with the story. All right? I love this story. There's a Chabad rabbi. He's one of my inspirations. He's such a sweet guy, and he's so committed. He's such a hardworking guy, and he's a real devoted soul. He's a special person. His name is Rabbi Yosef Levin. He's a Chabad rabbi. He established Chabad in Palo Alto, California, and he went out in 1986, I believe. So when he went out in 1986, he got the Rebbe's blessing to open up a new chapter of Chabad. And the Rebbe told him to meet with his, this wasn't his official title, but the Rebbe told him to meet with his chief of staff. The Rebbe's man who took care of managed the Chabad operation worldwide, directly under the Rebbe. His name is Rabbi Chodakov, very impressive individual. And he said, go speak with him, and Rabbi Chodakov will train you in and guide you in what you should be doing when you move to Palo Alto, California. So he and his wife meet with really their boss. The Rebbe is the boss, but practically you're always in touch with Rabbi Chodakov. If there's a problem, if there's an update, and Rabbi Chodakov would already update the Rebbe. So Rabbi Chodakov says, I just want you to know, sometimes you'll go to Palo Alto, and you'll meet a Jew, and he doesn't keep Shabbos. And he looks at himself as somebody who doesn't keep Shabbos. That's like a stereotype. He created like an image for himself. I don't keep Shabbos. Rabbi Chodakov told Rabbi Levin, he said, you should know, don't fall for the stereotype. Just because somebody works on Shabbos doesn't mean that they can't keep Shabbos. They could do something. Okay, so they're not going to drop working on Shabbos cold turkey. But he told Rabbi Levin, you could encourage them. Maybe they shouldn't carry anything in their pockets when they go to work. Maybe instead of driving, they could walk that day to work. Maybe the lights in the shop could be on a timer. Don't open up the lights. Maybe in honor of Shabbos, in between customers, have a Torah book, and in honor of Shabbos, you study. Like encourage people to, like, don't say, oh, I don't keep Shabbos, I don't do anything. No, you could keep Shabbos, something, He said, just remember that. It's not like, don't allow Jews to put themselves into boxes. One thing is meaningful. They keep Shabbos with this limited one thing, and they can grow from there. So Rabbi Levin says that, in fact, he goes and he meets a Jew who's a war survivor, elderly Jew. He grew up what we'll call Frum, Orthodox. He grew up in a Hasidic home, but he was not religious at all. He meets Rabbi Levin. He tells Rabbi Levin, "Oh, you probably don't really consider me as much of a Jew." Rabbi Levin says, "Why not?" He says, "I don't keep Shabbos." He had a jewelry shop. Well, yeah, he would repair jewelry. He said, "I'm open on Shabbos." So Rabbi Levin said, he says, "I don't keep Shabbos." So Rabbi Levin said, "Don't say you don't keep Shabbos. Okay, even if you feel that you need to go into work on Shabbos, you could do something. You could do something to keep Shabbos." And Rabbi Levin said, for example, if somebody brings in jewelry, okay, so you have this, but you don't have to actually do the repair on Shabbos. Do the repair on Monday, do it on Friday. This Jew doesn't answer anything, but a few months later, Rabbi Levin visits his shop on a Friday, and a customer walks in with a watch to repair. And this Jew says, "I'll have it ready on Monday." He says, I can't have it ready by tomorrow. I'm ready on Monday. So Rabbi Levin told this Jew, he says, "Oh, wow, I see business is doing very well. You're backed up." This Jew said, no, business is not doing that well. He said, "Since you told me that, I made a commitment that I keep the store open on Shabbos. I won't do anything repairs on Shabbos." That's the story. It's like a paradigm shift. Don't allow stereotypes to kind of mess with your version of what being a Jew is all about. Right? You're a Jew, you have a Jewish soul, your Jewish soul is beautiful, just as healthy as anybody else's. And let's not allow these like titles, these boxes, these labels, denominations and religious to stifle us. Do a mitzvah, do whatever sounds right. And don't be worried they don't do more, you do less. This is what it's all about. One mitzvah, connect with God. And if you feel you're ready for it, do another mitzvah. It's not about being frum. It's not the way to look at it. So, dear friends, with that, right? Let's put it this way. It's not about religious and irreligious Jews. You can just simply put it, Jews who connect more often and Jews who connect with God a little bit less often. Okay, but every mitzvah is valuable. Every mitzvah is important. Right? Forget about religion. Start building a relationship with God. Simply do one mitzvah. And with that, we conclude next week, same place, same time, lesson 5. It's a fun class next week, titled His Paradoxes. A little bit more of like a philosophical and a little bit more of a more out there class. And I want to thank you all for joining. Have a wonderful evening. Stay warm. See you all next week, God willing.